France, early 19th century. Around 1818 AD, the village of Ars lay quiet beneath the grey morning sky. Its stone cottages huddled close together as though seeking comfort against the bitter wind. France, still bearing the scars of the Revolution, had lost more than kings and crowns. It had lost certainty, tradition, and faith. Churches had reopened, yes, but their walls were echo chambers of silence. The people had returned to prayer, but only halfway. Faith was fragile, hesitant, half alive. Into this fragile, wounded land came a man whose presence would ripple through centuries. His name was John Vianney, though the villagers knew him simply as the new priest of Ars. Vianney was unremarkable by appearance. Thin, frail, and awkward. He stumbled through Latin prayers and struggled with the simplest theological concepts. Many had doubted his intelligence. Others laughed at his awkwardness. But beneath his humble exterior burned an intensity few could comprehend. His eyes, deep and restless, seemed to pierce beyond the surface, seeing the very souls of those he encountered. By day, he walked the streets slowly, greeting farmers returning from frozen fields, shopkeepers counting coins in the dim light, children laughing and slipping in the mud. He carried a weight invisible to others, the spiritual burden of every soul in Ars, particularly those who lived in spiritual half-light. These were the souls that haunted him most, the lukewarm, not openly sinful, not openly holy. Those who said, "I believe," but only just enough to feel safe. These souls terrified him more than any sinner or thief. One night, alone in the dimly lit church, Vianney knelt on the cold stone floor. The wind outside pressed against the walls, moaning faintly through cracks. He whispered a prayer, trembling, "Lord, show me what becomes of those who live with half-hearted faith." The candle beside him flickered, and suddenly the church seemed to vanish. He felt as if his soul were being pulled from the world, he knew, into a space neither of earth nor heaven. The cold stone beneath him dissolved. Silence enveloped him so completely that he could not hear his own heartbeat. Before him stretched a vast, grey expanse. Not darkness, not light. A place suspended in time, where the air itself seemed to hesitate. And within that silence moved figures, human shapes, conscious and aware, yet distant from joy and life. These were the lukewarm souls. They did not burn. They did not cry. They simply existed, caught in the unbearable tension of what they had missed. They could see heaven, feel its joy, but they could never enter it. A voice echoed in the emptiness, not angry, not cruel, but full of solemn truth. They wanted enough of me to feel safe, but not enough to be transformed. Vianney fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. He understood, in that instant, why Christ had spoken so harshly of lukewarm souls. Their punishment was subtle, nearly invisible, yet eternal. Could you have faced this reality, knowing indifference could cost your soul? Comment below and share your thoughts. When the vision ended, he found himself back on the cold stone floor of the church. Dawn light slipped through the stained glass, indifferent and soft. The candle had burned to the end. Vianney's body shook violently, not from cold, but from the intensity of what he had witnessed. From that day on, everything changed. His sermons became shorter, but heavier, full of urgency. He no longer spoke gently about sin. He spoke of the tragedy of missed heaven, of the dangers of half-hearted faith, of the slow death of the soul through indifference. Confession lines grew. Pilgrims arrived from miles around. People wept, trembled, and left transformed. But the cost to Vianney was tremendous. Nights were restless. He faced mockery, and even violent spiritual attacks, objects thrown around him, voices whispering in the dark. Yet he persisted, driven by a vision he could not unsee and a mission he could not abandon. The years passed. Vianney's body weakened. His hands grew gnarled, his voice soft. But the fire within him never dimmed, even near the end of his life. He said to a fellow priest who asked why he worked himself to death, "If I do not warn them, who will?" In 1859, John Vianney died. Thousands attended his funeral. People said standing near his body felt like standing before both a warning and an invitation. He did not reveal hell in fire and brimstone. He revealed something far more unsettling, the fate of souls who settle for almost, who believe just enough to be comfortable, but never surrender fully. And the question his life leaves behind still echoes through history. If faith becomes only habit, what becomes of the soul? If this story has gripped you so far, comment below, like this video, and follow the channel for more dark, forgotten spiritual histories designed to make you think and feel deeply. The dawn light had barely touched the stone floors of Ars church when Vianney slowly rose, his body trembling, his mind still echoing with the vision of the grey expanse and the lukewarm souls he had seen. The chill of the early morning air brushed his face as he walked to the window, staring at the frost-covered village. He felt a weight he could not describe, a burden not of stone or flesh, but of countless human hearts, many of which were lost in the subtle trap of indifference. Vianney knew that what he had witnessed was not punishment, not in the fiery sense the world imagined. It was far more insidious, a quiet, invisible separation from grace, a limbo for souls who lived almost faithful lives. He understood then that his mission in Ars was no longer merely tending to the church or teaching prayers. It was a war for the very soul of the village. Over the following weeks, Vianney immersed himself deeper into the daily lives of the villagers. He walked through the narrow streets before sunrise, observing farmers struggle with frozen tools, women carrying heavy bundles of firewood, children shivering as they dashed to school. Every face he passed was a story, some joyful, some burdened, most simply unaware of the eternal stakes upon which their souls rested. He began spending hours in the confessional. The line stretched longer each day. Some penitents confessed sins of obvious vice, others sins of omission, missed masses, neglected prayers, postponed sacrifices. Vianney listened with unwavering attention, but his concern grew deepest for those whose hearts were lukewarm. He prayed silently as he heard their words. "I will do better next week. I've sinned, but I try. God will forgive, I hope." The deeper he listened, the more he felt the spiritual weight pressing down on him. His nights became a vigil. Kneeling before the altar, candles flickering around him, he prayed for guidance, for strength, for a way to awaken the hearts of those drifting so quietly from salvation. The cold stones under his knees seemed to echo the silence of the lukewarm souls themselves. Alive, conscious, yet neither fully in the light nor consumed by darkness. One particularly frigid night, the church empty, but for the shadows cast by a single candle, Vianney felt the pull again, the same pull that had drawn him into the grey expanse. He fell to his knees, whispering, "Lord, show me how to reach them. Show me how to save them before it is too late." The shadows grew long, stretching unnaturally along the walls. And then the world around him shifted. He found himself once more in that same grey expanse. But this time, the scene was different. The figures moved closer. Faces of familiar villagers appeared, those he had seen the day before, those he had spoken to in confession. Their eyes held no malice, no fear, but a piercing awareness of their own complacency. Among them, he saw a young man he had met earlier in the week. The man had confessed lazily, almost jokingly, and Vianney now saw the truth of his soul. He could have been a beacon of faith, but instead, he hesitated, choosing comfort over conviction. A young woman appeared as well, her prayers half-spoken, her heart divided between devotion and worldly concerns. Vianney's chest tightened. He could see, in every hesitation, every delay, the threads of eternity fraying. "Could you stand here?" he whispered, "and not act?" The voice, or perhaps the truth itself, seemed to answer. Only those who surrender fully may enter the light. Vianney wept silently as he knelt among them. He realized that salvation was not something to be taken lightly. Every decision, every hesitation, every half-hearted prayer carried weight. And yet, he also saw the path to redemption, the power of confession, of earnest prayer, of transformation. The very souls that seemed trapped were not yet lost. There was still time, but the hour was urgent. When he returned to the church, the candle had burned low, yet a clarity rested upon him. He knew that urgency must be conveyed in every sermon, every interaction, every confession. There could be no delay, no gentle words without weight. The village must awaken, and he would be their warning, their guide, their shepherd. The days and nights that followed were a rhythm of unceasing devotion. Vianney walked among the villagers at dawn, offering prayers for their labor, guidance for their hearts. By midday, he heard confessions that could stretch for hours. Listening to the minutiae of sins, the whispers of conscience, the hidden regrets of ordinary lives. He began noting, in his mind, who needed stern words, who needed gentle guidance, who needed the sheer force of spiritual urgency. By evening, he would return to the church, kneeling again before the altar, praying in silence, fasting, meditating. Shadows flickered along the walls, and some nights he heard whispers that seemed to rise from nowhere. Objects shifted slightly, candles flickered wildly, and a chill would sweep the room, as if unseen forces sought to challenge him. Yet he did not flinch. He began to see patterns. Some villagers responded with immediate transformation, others resisted, clinging to their habits. Children learned prayers, but forgot them by the next day. Adults confessed sins, but delayed change. And in each hesitation, Vianney saw the peril of the lukewarm heart. He realized that his own struggles, the exhaustion, the ridicule, the physical weakness, were nothing compared to the spiritual urgency pressing upon him. One night, as snow fell silently over Ars, Vianney stood at the edge of the village, observing the distant flicker of lanterns in homes. Each light represented a life, a heart, a soul. He whispered a prayer for each. Do not let them be lost in complacency. Guide them before it is too late. A vision returned, more vivid, more intense than before. The grey expanse appeared again, and this time, the souls moved in patterns he had not seen. Some turned toward a faint glimmer in the distance, a hint of light, a chance for redemption. Others hesitated, drawn backward by invisible chains of habit, fear, and half-hearted devotion. The air in that place seemed to hum with possibility and warning. Vianney understood clearly the battle for the soul was both immediate and eternal. Not all who seemed safe were safe. Not all who prayed were heard. And yet intervention, guidance, and true faith could shift the course of destiny. He returned to Ars in the quiet of night, his knees sore, his body trembling, but his resolve unbroken. Each day, each confession, each sermon became a vital piece in the tapestry of salvation. He realized that the stakes were not only for Ars, but for the generations that would hear of his devotion, for the stories that would pass through time to awaken hearts, even far beyond this small village. If you were in Vianney's position, seeing the quiet peril of countless souls, would you have had the courage to act? Comment below and share your thoughts. As weeks turned to months, the village began to change. Confessions lengthened, hearts opened, and subtle transformations began to ripple through Ars. Yet for Vianney, the work was endless. Each day brought new challenges, the indifferent, the distracted, the fearful. Each night brought visions that demanded understanding, reflection, and renewed strength. He knew that his life, though frail, must become a living warning and invitation. Not through fear, but through clarity, devotion, and relentless spiritual urgency. The grey expanse had shown him the cost of indifference, and he vowed never to let those souls drift into eternal hesitation without effort to awaken them. And so, the village of Ars became a place where faith was both tested and nurtured, where one man's relentless devotion drew souls back from the brink, and where the quiet urgency of eternity could be glimpsed by anyone willing to listen. The snow had settled thickly over Ars, blanketing the village in a hush so complete it seemed the world itself held its breath. Vianney, thin and worn from years of relentless devotion, knelt before the altar as he had countless times, yet this night felt different. The weight pressing upon him was heavier, denser, as though the very air carried the tension of eternity. As he closed his eyes, the familiar pull returned. He felt himself lifted, not violently, but irresistibly, into that vast grey expanse he had glimpsed before. Only now, it was no longer an empty, silent void. The area stretched infinitely in all directions, populated by souls. Thousands upon thousands, their faces alight with awareness yet dimmed by hesitation. Vianney walked among them, his gaze sharp, recognizing many from Ars. The man who postponed confession, the woman who prayed only when convenient, the children whose prayers had been half learned and quickly forgotten. Their eyes met his, wide with understanding, and in many cases, silent terror. They knew the truth. He had seen heaven was near, yet forever out of reach. A voice, deeper and more resonant than before, filled the space. They lived with almost enough devotion. They sought me, yet never surrendered fully. And now they feel the weight of eternity. Vianney fell to his knees among them. He could feel the despair, the longing, the regret that had accumulated over years of indifference. No flames, no torments, but a truth far more piercing. The full awareness of what had been missed, the knowledge of heaven always just beyond their grasp. He moved through the expanse, touching the souls, whispering prayers of mercy and hope. Some quivered at his presence, some seemed to stir, drawn toward a distant, faint light. Others remained rooted in the grey, held back by chains invisible but unbreakable. He saw that even a single moment of sincere repentance could begin to lift them toward salvation, yet many hesitated still. Vianney's heart ached. He understood now, more profoundly than ever, that salvation was not merely about avoiding sin. It was about embracing God fully, without reservation. Lukewarm faith, no matter how benign in life, could still lead to an eternity of regret. Could you imagine seeing eternity, feeling its warmth, yet never being able to touch it? Comment below if this vision shakes you. The vision shifted. Now Vianney saw scenes of village life, replaying moments he had witnessed with new clarity. The farmer who missed Mass, the mother who delayed confessions, the children whose prayers had been incomplete, all choices repeated over years, echoing through the grey expanse. He saw their lives as threads in a vast tapestry, some vibrant, many dim, but all connected to the eternal. Every hesitation, every half-hearted effort, every postponed act of devotion had its weight, and the pattern was undeniable. Indifference cost eternity. Suddenly, the faint glimmer he had seen before intensified. A narrow path of light stretched through the grey, winding and delicate, fragile yet radiant. Those who reached toward it began to glow softly, their forms solidifying, gaining clarity and warmth. Vianney understood. This was the pathway of true surrender, of repentance lived fully, not just prayed about. He turned to the souls still trapped in grey. His voice, trembling yet commanding, rose above the silence. "Turn toward the light! Do not wait any longer! Surrender now, fully, and begin your journey!" Some did. Slowly. Hesitantly, their forms brightened, their postures straightened, and they began to move toward the light. Others looked at him, fear and indecision warring in their eyes. Vianney wept, silently begging for mercy, silently willing them to choose. When the vision ended, Vianney found himself back in the quiet church of Ars. The candle had burned low, casting a soft glow. His knees ached, his hands trembled, but in his heart was clarity stronger than any physical pain. He understood that his entire life's mission was defined by this urgency to awaken souls before it was too late. Over the next years, Ars transformed. Confessions became lengthy, sincere and heartfelt. Villagers changed their habits, prayed with fervor, and approached every Mass with devotion, understanding the stakes more deeply. Children grew in faith, guided by example and witness. Travelers came from distant towns, drawn by the reports of Vianney's spiritual insight, drawn by the tales of the priest who had glimpsed eternity. Yet Vianney himself remained humble, frail, and ever vigilant. Nights were still long, filled with prayers and visions, fasting and meditation. He understood that the spiritual battle never truly ends. Even after one soul is awakened, countless others remain in danger of drifting. Finally, in 1859, John Vianney passed away. Thousands gathered, witnessing not just the death of a man, but the culmination of a life devoted entirely to the salvation of souls. Many claim to feel a warmth, a presence of clarity and urgency, a spiritual invitation. His legacy became eternal, a warning and an example. Vianney did not reveal hell in flames or torment. He revealed something far subtler, far more frightening, the eternal cost of lukewarm faith, the quiet tragedy of souls who settle for almost enough, the power of full surrender, and the necessity of immediate devotion. The final lesson of his life echoes across time. Do not delay. Do not hesitate. Faith is not a habit, it is fire. Choose fully, surrender completely, and do not wait, for eternity does not pause. Could you surrender completely if you were in his place? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Like this video, and follow the channel for more stories of hidden spiritual truths and the extraordinary lives of saints who changed the course of history.